What is up with Sanji's bounty? He is one of the strongest Straw Hats, and yet his bounty has been one of the ones that has had the highest fluctuation. Not to mention now, he's not even considered in the top 3 bounties of the whole crew. So what gives? Well, there's a very good reason for this, and in this short video, I'm going to explain to you why Sanji is actually dropped to the number 4 spot on the Straw Hat. When it comes to the different way that power is measured within the world of One Piece, there are a few factors that are One's devil fruit, their hockey, a bunch of factors figure into that, their martial arts style. There's a lot that can be chosen from, but one of the biggest indicators of how dangerous somebody can be is their bounty. Now, obviously, bounties aren't the biggest indicator. For one thing, somebody could pose as somebody else using it just to get clout. For another thing, it can be misassigned. A great example of this is Buggy, who has this massive bounty without actually being all that dangerous. But Sanji is on arguably one of the most powerful crews in the New World, and he is one of the most powerful members of that crew. And yet his bounty has always been slightly off. He didn't get a bounty during the Arabasta arc, and then he also got his bounty with the wrong picture initially. So he's always had shade at him thrown through his bounties, but this feels different. He is now considered the number 4 on the Straw Hat crew because Jinbe got a larger bounty. Is there a specific reason for that? I know many people have said this is merely because A, Jinbe already had a starting bounty from before he was a warlord, and then there's the fact that, they really don't take into account specific sets of power. But if I may be so bold, I think because this tends to also coincide with the people who say Chopper's bounty is deliberately underestimated, I think we have to also consider the possibility that while Sanji is incredibly strong, he's not actually as strong as Jinbe and Zoro. Now, I know that's going to be a very controversial topic, and I know people love Sanji, I love Sanji, especially pre-time skip Sanji, but, there is something we just have to acknowledge that when we look at the track record of characters in One Piece, he kind of has one of the lesser performing feat status. Don't get me wrong, he is a wing of the Pirate King and has been for a long time until the crew was completed. But in regards to, his signature battles and stuff, he doesn't usually end up finishing off his opponents, and when he does, it's usually because somebody else was already taking pretty big swings at them to begin with. Even if we just take something like Frillerbark into account, his opponent for that whole arc was Absalom, and while he could have beat Absalom, he got distracted, and he let Absalom get away with Nami, and he took some pretty serious damage in the occurrence. Compare that with Zoro's fight against Ryuma, who's technically a zombie, so shouldn't be as powerful as Absalom, who's a general, and yet, Zoro kind of clapped Ryuma really, really quickly, versus Sanji, who really needed Nami to finish his fight for him. And a lot of Sanji's fights are that way. I think, some of them he finishes on his own. He does really well with them. We can look at, his fight against, Bon Clay. But then, you look at some of them, and it's just, he usually ends up either not finishing off his opponent or finishing off an opponent that somebody else has already been fighting for a little bit. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I am saying that Sanji has never had a feat quite like tanking a battleship by himself, whereas I'm completely sure Jinbe could absolutely sink a battleship by himself, and we kind of have evidence for that because he almost does it when they're breaking out of Impel Down. So Sanji's bounty probably seems low to a large majority of the fan base, and I totally get that, but the problem is he's never quite gotten the same upgrades that Zoro did, so while he is probably the 3rd most powerful member on the crew, as the crew has grown, that bridge in power has actually shrunk in his favor and, given a lot over to Zoro, who's just exceptional. Because, in classic One Piece, you had Nami, Chopper, and Usopp were the rest of the crew. And while not weak by any stretch of the word, they were not as strong as Zoro and him. Now he's contending with Jinbe, Robin, Frankie, and Brook. All of whom, while probably not as strong as him, except for Jinbe, I think Jinbe might actually be equal to or a little stronger, aren't weak. And that does certainly, I think, shrink a lot of his achievements in combat alone. That having been said, Sanji is not a combat alone character. He's supposed to be very intelligent, which he is, mostly, and he's supposed to be very tactical, which he is. That having been said, so is Zoro. I think that the ideas, though, is different. Zoro is frontline warfare tactical. Sanji is spy tactical. And those differences do help them stand out in the crew. It's just kind of reflective here that I think because many of Sanji's greatest moments for us as fans happen to be moments where he outfought an opponent. He didn't overpower them. It's really left the opinion of the world government that he's not as dangerous as a couple other members of the crew. That's probably not true, but he probably couldn't go toe-to-toe with some of the other characters that we've seen everyone else single shot. Though, I do have to note that as they have gone farther and farther into the world of One Piece, and as we approach the end, nobody is finishing single fights anymore. Everybody has, taken a turn battling against most major opponents at this point, whether it was Big Mom, whether it was Kaido, whether it's going to be the Gorosei, and eventually whoever else we get thrown at. They're not characters that get fought by one singular person, they're characters that everybody teams up on. But what do you think? Has Sanji really earned that bounty? Do you think he should be number 3, or do you think maybe Jinbe is just that little bit stronger than him? Leave a comment below.